All right, everybody. Thanks for joining me, Denise Siegel, Helen from Irish Granny Tarot, and Deborah. I don't know if you want me to say your last name, but Deborah from the Cosmic Fold. We are on there every Wednesday nights, which you should join us. We have a live stream. It's really great. We talk about all kinds of paranormal stuff, and we have guests on. It's Deborah's show, and it's really fantastic. It's a lot of fun.
And you could call in. It only took almost a year to figure it out, but you can, if you're afraid to get on actually, the equipment was bad. I kept getting mansplained too, so I got other equipment, works just fine. But,
Oh, good.
yeah. But anyway, you can, if you're afraid to like pop in or you can call. And so you can watch the show and call. And Denise tested it. It works.
Yeah, it works. It works. You can text us too if you don't want to call. There's like a chat thing. So yeah, it's a really fun show, and I highly recommend it. It's a lot of fun. We have great conversations.
Thank
All
you.
right, so I asked these guys to read this insane book, which they did. I asked, yes, thank you. Final Events. Right. So by Nick Redfern. Because I read it and I could not believe it, because I actually have a lot of direct experience with some of the people that he references in the beginning of the book. Not that I knew Jack Parsons or whatever his name was, but I knew someone in that community who I studied with, who was a ceremonial magician named Poke Runyon back in the early 90s, who did know Jack Parsons, who knew all of those characters that are in that first section of the book. And I know Poke, and I know that whole, thelemic magical system, ceremonial magic. And it is not very powerful, to be totally honest with you. It's kind of lame. It's like one step above going to Catholic Church ceremony.
Hey!
No offense, but it was really, I mean, I had come from a background of doing Wicca, and that was very intensive and very powerful. And this was just like, boom, it's just nothing really. So, so if you haven't read the book, the first chapter goes into this whole very insane thing about how Jack Parsons opened up this portal because he was the devil himself, and he was best buds with, Aleister Crowley, who my teacher told me, Aleister Crowley was really kind of more of a bad, just like it was a lot of bullshit, a lot of just pomp and circumstance and lies. And he
performative.
It was totally performative. Yeah, he wasn't this powerful magician. He was just kind of this guy who liked to be a bad boy. The reason I think Poke kind of moved away from the OTO, or the Ordo Temple Orientis. There he is. Yes, he was the naughty. People used to call him the Beast and all this stuff, and he said, well, that he was the most evil man on the planet. Or he's like, no, he was the naughtiest man. He was full of it. He was kind of like the Trump of the magical world. He was a very self-aggrandizing kind of bullshitter. So this whole book proceeds on this idea that Jack Parsons, who was a student of Aleister Crowley, somehow opens up this portal that all of a sudden all these UFOs come through, and demonic possessions and all this crazy right-wing Christian stuff, which I really wanted to talk to you guys about, because first of all, the phenomena goes back to the beginning of humanity. And also, let's not forget that actually all of the activity really started around the atomic bomb blasts. That was really when the portal opened, and it had nothing to do with Jack Parsons. That was just a ridiculous conflation that was sort of seen through that bubble of their superstition, basically, and fear. And I wanted to talk to you guys about what your take on a lot of this was. So I just throw it to you guys. So what stood out to you? Because this book is really something else. It was really disturbing to me that our government has people in it. And there are certain sections in there where they talk about how George Bush, after 9/11, if you remember this, decided to, like, he was going to do this big operation where he's going to have this hologram of Jesus in the sky and try to get everyone to become Christian and all this really weird stuff.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I think that technology was used as sort of in Florida last like a year and a half ago to sort of test out if people could deal with aliens. I'm pretty sure that's the technology they use. But anyway, what did you guys get out of the book? And we could just throw it to you guys. What was your take on it?
You go first, Helen.
Okay. Well, I felt very validated because I'm really serious. So I have this weird combo of interests. I'm really interested in white Christian nationalists and politics and UFOs and the metaphysical. And there's actually an intersection.
That's right. There is.
Chris Beslow, whose book we did, and Luis Elizondo, whose book we did, all confirmed this, coming at it from a different angle. So here's the deal.
That's what got me interested in this book.
Subset of people in the Pentagon and national security and politics, and they kind of intersect together, and they believe fully in conservative fundamentalist Christianity that ETs are fallen angels, evil entities.
That's right.
That they want to come to suck our souls out of us, so we can all go into the lake of fire forever.
Yes, that's right.
Book of Revelation, right? They 100% believe this nonsense, and as a result, anybody who advocates for some sort of acceptance or understanding or reaching out or even trying to back engineer materials or even discussing the fact that physical things landed and what you said, this has been going on from time immemorial. This is not a
new phenomenon.
They're crazy. But the thing that struck me was the last chapter. When I started to read this book, I thought Nick Redfern, I didn't think he was this kind of crazy. I was surprised. When I got to the last chapter, it was a relief because it talked about a final whistleblower who came to him and said, I quit this cabal in disgust.
That's right.
Because of what they wanted to do. They want to turn this country into a fundamentalist Christian theocracy.
That's right.
And they have infiltrated the military. To ladies and gentlemen, I present Pete Hegseth.
And here's the thing. Here's the crossover. Because if you remember when these right-wing Christians, the Christian Caliphate, got into a position where they're at now, one of the things they said was they're going to come after all the people who are New Agers and psychics and astrologers and people who believed in ETs or who had, experiencers or whatever. And I was like, why would they, and this is why, because they believe this old book of fairy tales, sorry to say, but it is. I mean, there's some good stuff in there. Jesus is awesome. But, it's just really a bunch of myths, and they don't really understand the context in which they're taking these things very literally. It was called, what was it called? That group of sort of people who had studied theocracy.
Collins Elite.
Collins Elite.
Yes, that's what I was looking up.
Yeah, the Collins Elite. And they were just a group of sort of not inside the military, but they were sort of brought into this little thing to study this material from this, fundamentalist right-wing Christian belief set. And they don't have any particular specific insider knowledge other than what they were being fed by those guys in the Pentagon who were right-wing Christian nationalists, basically, and when Lou Elizondo talked about this is what made me interested in the book. He was saying that this is actually one of the reasons why we don't really have anything going on with studying. Like they're really resistant to studying this.
Yes.
And this is a problem because, look, this has been going on since time. If they were really here to suck people's souls, and I understand that the phenomena is weird and creepy and scary sometimes, but a lot of the data is that, there are just like people, because they're from some other dimension or something. There are good ones and bad ones and ones that are negative and ones that are neutral. And there's a whole subset of a lot of different, they're not monolithic, right? And they certainly are not fallen angels. They're just these strange interdimensional beings. And maybe they are. Maybe the people in the Old Testament experienced these phenomena and assign them these demonic or angelic kinds of categories because they didn't know what else to do with it. But this is I mean, it's absolutely, it was kind of like it kind of freaked me out to actually see how down the rabbit hole our government
Yeah.
is with this
This
stuff.
whistleblower predicted in about 2010-11, he predicted that in 10 years from then, we
Right.
would see a military that was prepared to police the streets against the civilians.
That's
And
right.
I
Right.
about lost my mind when I heard
That's
that.
right.
Yeah.
That's right. So this plan that we are in right now, Project 2025, which Trump did not write,
That's right.
it goes back all the way to this point. And I thought that was a really interesting and weird kind of coincidence. Whatever, to read that book and have all of these pieces kind of fit together and go, wow, this is the seeds of this started 25 years ago. You know what we're in the
You
middle
know,
of. Nobody
one
thought
thing
it.
that I kind of, aside from my own thoughts and
Yeah.
how I felt about this, back when I had a show called The God Discussion, I was the very first one that made atheism kind of like a thing, and you know, interviewed people and found out what people really thought. One of the greatest advocate groups that I worked with was the Military Religious Freedom Foundation. Mikey
Right.
Weinstein. He was an attorney for Ronald Reagan. He lives in New Mexico. We did fundraisers for him, and I thought about sending him a copy of this
Yeah.
and to see what he thinks and have him come on either any of your
Yes.
shows or the Cosmic Fold,
Yeah.
and we can like air it all the way through,
Yes.
because he has been battling this, you know, this religious indoctrination, and they still are in the military.
bad.
It's very
Yeah.
disturbing what's going on, you know. But just in reading this, it made me very uncomfortable. It was
Mhm.
so, and I'm thinking, what the hell is our military chasing after all these weird things? You know, this Collins Elite,
Right.
you know, they had all these people sitting in on seances and all this stuff over the years. And I
Right.
think they even had a section about where they were even going to psychic fairs and stuff like that. Your
That's right.
taxpayers pay your dollars at work chasing around this nonsense.
You know what? I
And,
think
you know, to prove that there's like these demonic presences in the form of aliens coming through. But one of the things growing up at a religious cult that
yes.
was fundy, hardcore, way more into the Old Testament than the New.
Mhm. Right.
So many of those things were like, you don't talk to sorcerers, you don't talk to astrologers, you don't talk to. That's why, you know, I got my mother a
Right.
reading from Denise, and I was just shocked that she accepted it, because for so long that was wickety, wickety, wickety.
Right.
And they
Right.
even, and it was even like, you don't even be a vegetarian. And I noticed that it said in this book about how vegetarians were bad. Then
Wow.
now this is the divergence though of these like Christian nationalist kind of thing. You've got the Dominions and then you've got the fundies. And the fundies are biblical literalists. And some of them
Right.
interpret the Bible in the same way that I grew up in this. It was called the Worldwide Church of God. They taught that you do not have a soul. And they brought
What?
that up in these arguments in here where they were talking
Really?
about,
I didn't
because there
know about
seemed to be an argument about, well, these wicked aliens suck the souls out. But then
Right.
the other like religious fundamentalists were saying, well, no, you don't have a soul. And what happens is that when you die, you're dead. That's it, until God says that people will raise from the dead. So there's the first wave that are like the, you know, the elite, the wonderful people that are in the 144,000 or whatever. Then
Oh my
there's
God,
like
and
this
now you
second.
sound like Lori Vallow. Oh my
Well,
God.
and then there's, well, this is what I grew up with.
Yeah,
And
this is-
then in the second wave would be the people that were kind of like, okay, they didn't know any better. And during these like resurrections, so they also didn't think that you should, you know, that you had to bury somebody. You could, why am I losing the word? What happens when you burn?
Cremation.
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 Yeah,
Right.
they were against cremation because when God calls, during all of this time, then them bones all click together and your body comes back and their soul is in the container. Because they were talking about the body as a container.
That's right. That's
Okay.
right.
And so then those people get like a second shot at it, and they can live like 1,000 years in this second, like Jesus governed like kingdom on earth. And then they'll be judged. The third group would be people like me, because I was told I was in the third group, are the really wicked, horrible people who don't believe in the Bible and think that, think there's something to aliens and all that kind of stuff. So I was told so many times that I was going to the lake of fire. And so what that meant was that when you die, you're dead. Okay, it's over. And then you get woken with these different resurrections that happen. And in the third group, you're just basically your soul like plugs back into the container, and then you're walked to the lake of fire and thrown in. And so in this cult that I grew up in, their interpretation, you didn't burn forever like hell. You just burnt once and it's over. So your soul is then extinguished. And so, but I noticed that when he went into, it was kind of turgid, where they were talking about the nature of consciousness and the soul and all that kind of stuff. But when I was reading it, thinking, okay, this word diverges from the fundy stuff that I grew up in. Because there was this argument, and it did appear in there, there were some people that were saying, no, the soul, when you die, the soul goes with you. There is no soul. It just kind of comes back.
Idea. That's a weird idea. I mean, especially,
see, and to me, it felt normal because we were taught that constantly.
Yeah, see, I didn't even pick up on that because I was like, what are they talking? I mean, what are they talking about? The container might be the soul. I was like, well, that doesn't make sense. I mean, the soul, the body is obviously the container of the soul,
Can I tell you a story? A quick story.
Okay. Sure.
So I talked to this guy once about 1.5 years ago called Dr. Ogi Ogas. It's a Mayan name. His mother was indigenous. And he is over in some big university, some kind of experimental mathematician or something. And the reason I talked to him was because I heard him doing a conversation on a podcast about the fact that all of his life he's spoken with aliens. I thought, this guy's a Harvard scientist. Oh, I got to talk to him. So here's the story he told, and it blew me away because it's identical to the story that the rock star Tom DeLonge said he was told by his connection to aliens.
Okay.
They didn't, at different times, and this guy's never published. So, okay, Tom DeLonge didn't get it from him somehow. So the story is kind of surprisingly similar to the story of the battle in heaven in the Bible, where Lucifer is a fallen angel. So they're all on an equal footing as far as their vibratory, spiritual, makeup and everything. But Lucifer got ahead of himself and thought he was as good as, if not better than God, a little bit of a narcissistic angel. There must be a special term for that. Anyway, he gets thrown out of heaven and comes down to earth. And they both told this story. And there's an ongoing struggle between some forms of aliens, because the important thing to remember is potato, alien, angel, spirit, extraterrestrial. We just are all wrapped up in semantics, right? So these higher vibratory, more advanced beings are at each other's throats. And we're kind of the pawns because it's convenient for them. They don't want our souls. They want to win. And they're fighting each other. And it's not like they're fighting each other for mastery of the universe or something. They're just at each other's throats, and we're being used.
Well, a lot of the stories. Well, if you think about all the stories of the ancient gods and goddesses, that's the same thing. I mean, they're just kind of fighting with each other, screwing with each other, and using people to do it. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that bothered me in this book, talking about using people, is that look at the things that you went through, Denise, about like being, this weird thing about in that psychic office. Where was it? Then they wanted you to
Yes.
go to Las Vegas. You've
Yes.
had all of these things where your mother had called the Air Force when you saw
Right.
that rift.
The
And
black.
then you've had, then the crackly, and they're listening to you on the phone and all that kind of
Yes.
stuff. And so I thought of you as I was reading this, and it's like, oh, so you've got they're expending huge amounts of
Money.
money, in a black budget to do this
Right.
and harass regular people who are having these experiences. And so that's why I sent you a text, because I had totally forgotten about this. So my brother and I both had seen UFOs and all of that. My parents were involved in forming MUFON in Wisconsin
Right.
in the early 60s. And my dad had built this like machine that could, because he said it was a ley line. He called it a magnet line or something, because that wasn't popular then. That would
Right.
detect things going over. And so I think the whole family was probably watched. But as I was reading this, it just dawned on me, we had this long, half-mile long driveway. We'd walk through the woods up in northern Wisconsin to wait for the school bus. And there was a period of like maybe 8 months, 9 months, where there was always this car parked down at the end, even when it was real snowy. It was like parked in the snowbank. And there were two men dressed in black. And that's when
Wow.
we
The
finally
Men in
told
Black.
our
Yeah.
parents, we were afraid to tell them anything because of the church,
Right. Right.
because
Right.
you would get in trouble for thinking even. And
Wow.
so, we didn't want to say, and finally we said something because it was so weird. They were down there like all the time, like at 6:30 in the morning, and it's dark up there in Wisconsin and all those trees, and it's
Sure.
cold,
Sure.
and there's these weird guys in black sitting there looking at you. And
Right.
that's why I sent you a text. Did you have
Yes.
that same thing? And like with your mother, and then you said your grandmother, I think your mother probably did too, because there's something about that. And I'm wondering if they were tied into these people that are
Right.
discussed in here, the Men in Black.
Yeah. I mean,
They mention
I,
it.
I think yeah, they did mention a story about the Men in Black, but I think that would turns out to be an actual military person. So the thing about the Men in Black is there's different kinds of Men in Black experiences. There's the ones that are kind of like maybe connected more with, they're kind of weird and more, not so material. And then there are those that are like obviously military people, you know what I mean, who dress in black and harass people.
But it was
Yeah.
so strange, like in that
Yeah.
movie where, I mean, these guys, they were both very
From head to
thin,
toe.
wore the black hat,
Right.
and had the little black tie, skinny little
Yeah.
tie, and the whole thing. It was like,
Right.
why would they? It was weird,
Why were they
and
sitting there? Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
it was the Blues Brothers.
well, that's what it was like, was the Blues Brothers, and it's like, why are they sitting there? All is that what you saw
Yeah.
too, Denise? Or
Well, what I saw was during the period where I was having a lot of, well, I've had several different run-ins with things that were weird. Like I told you, that psychic line, which I have been working for. I had been working for this one psychic line. Somehow somebody kept bugging me to try to talk to these people at this other psychic line. This other psychic line was run by actually naval intelligence officer, which I found out later.
Well, that's interesting.
Yes, yes, it is. It's very weird. In fact, naval
ties
intelligence.
into this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, they're the ones who do a lot of the research on it, which I found out later. And that was a very strange thing. That's a whole thing in itself, another story. But that funneled me into this other very tiny little group of psychics in which I'd had dreams about 5 or 6 years before that I was going to be in this room, this white room, being watched by aliens and by the government, and that that the word Oxnard kept coming up in the dreams, and it was really weird, and it was creepy, and anyway, I got funneled into this thing, and there was a woman that was one of the people that they hired who talked to an alien all the time, and me, and there were only 7 of us total, which is very strange to begin with, right? All in a room, and we were being listened to constantly, and we never got any phone calls. And the guy who headed it up kept trying to get me to go to Las Vegas with him. And I was like, why is this guy trying to take me to Las Vegas on the weekends? It really creeped me out. And he kept being so insistent that okay, so there was also a white van parked out in front every single day that was totally unmarked. And above us, there was supposed to be an empty office. But when you go outside to go for lunch, you would see sometimes the drapes moving, or like the whatever, you'd see like movement. And when I would complain, why don't we get any phone calls? How are you making money? Because we were getting paid twice the normal rate of all the other psychic lines, which was also odd. And they didn't care about getting any phone calls. I'm like, why don't we get any calls? He goes, oh, well, you're going to get some soon. I'm like, are you running ads? And he's like, oh, yeah. And then somebody would call, but you could tell because it was back in the early 90s. It was coming from inside the building, and it was very cagey and they wouldn't talk. And it was clearly some kind of, you could tell it was, I mean, if you're psychic, you knew it was not a real phone call, a real psychic. And I've been doing readings for a long time.
And I wonder if this group, if you're in those files, because it was just remarkable. You probably are, because it was mind blowing to me how much they had infiltrated.
Yes, they had
the metaphysical community.
Well, do you think we're going to be guilty by association? Because I have an appointment. I need to go.
You're already in the files by now if you're on YouTube doing this.
Let me tell you something really quickly that I overheard on a podcast about a year ago. The young person who tragically died, not through any fault.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So he and a guy called Nick Fuentes.
Yes. Right.
Total Nazi. We're having a conversation on a podcast. I heard these words come out of their mouth. One says to the other, these people who toy with the devil, psychics, astrologers, tarot card readings.
We're going to kill them. Yeah.
They should be executed. And when we win, they will be. It's like the same.
And it commands them to do that in the Old Testament. You're supposed to stone them to death.
You're not supposed to wear linen and wool at the same time.
Yeah, I'll have to find it because I remember being taught that kind of stuff.
Yeah. But you're also supposed to stone people to death for having affairs too.
Adulterers.
All kinds of things.
Yeah.
And so, but this book was very disturbing to me. But I do think it's worth a read to understand this obsession about Christianizing our military and how they're acting with respect to UAPs, as they call them now.
Yeah, right.
And then I'm wondering about like Skinwalker Ranch, what is actually going on out there, because it was like, so these people have this ranch and they're looking at it, and then the blonde guy, the scientist from Alabama that's in there,
right?
Well, after they're like 2 or 3 years into the show, then he reveals he's with some government agency.
Really?
And so, yes. And they were mad. Some of the people wanted to like get rid of them.
Wow.
And so, they're pervading all of this. And I just think how much money is spent doing this. And if you wanted to weed out like the psychic field, there's so much nonsense out there.
There is. There's a lot of nonsense.
And they're spending this much money hanging out with these people. It's just, I don't.
Well, I can tell you that before I even got tapped to go into that particular thing that led me to the Naval Intelligence guy, that led into this other really weird. And by the way, that particular place, the name of the street it was on was Oxnard.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I was just working at the first psychic line that ever opened, and there was probably 1,000 people that worked there. Most of them were really bad and they weren't really psychic. They just had bodies and seats pretty much. And right before we went into the first Iraq war with George Bush Sr., I started getting phone calls that had a beep on them. I knew instantly, just vibey, like this is somebody from the government. And I
did too. And my house was broken into, and they dusted everything and went through all my files. It was that same period of time.
Yeah, they were doing something, and they were calling the psychic line, and I would get them, and I would do, and I'm like, do you work in the government? And they would say yes. I'm like, are you taping this? Yes. And I started getting them a lot, these phone calls. Other people maybe got them once and then never got them again. But I started getting them a lot before I got fed into this whole thing. And I think they were trolling around doing like on some kind of secret thing. I mean, when I look back at it, it was like I was pushed into this whole thing. Like just I was being harassed into going into this one psychic room and harassed to go to this other one. And the whole thing is just so weird because the moment that I finally got tired of that one place with the 7 people and no calls, and I was like, this is just really strange. And I don't want to work here anymore because I don't know what the fuck is going on. I can tell there's something, some kind of ulterior motive going on. I quit. And then the next day, my friend, I was very close friends with, called me and told me that they had a sign on the door saying it was shut down and to go to this other place.
Yep.
And the guy disappeared. And I was like, that was really weird. And I felt like there is something that I don't know why. And I was the only person he kept asking to go to Las Vegas with. I had no idea that Las Vegas and Area 51 or any of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I started thinking later, was he trying to get me to go there to go to do something? Why didn't he just tell me? I mean, maybe if he had been upfront, I would have been open to it. But the caginess and the creepiness and the weird lying that I could tell he was lying the whole time, I didn't trust him. You know what I mean? I didn't know what the fuck his deal was.
Well,
So
it's hard for them to relinquish control. It's all about controlling.
Yeah. Well, around that time, I was helped a couple psychics get their, websites up and running. That was like a new thing. And since I use my own servers, I could go in and log and see who's, checking out these different websites. And I had U.S. military in there all the time on these psychic websites.
Wow.
And so it was just like a thing.
The 90s or?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
And so, and they do it covert. And I think that might be what bothered me about this book was the creepy, dishonest, feel about it, sneaking around, kind of voyeuristic in a way to find out what people are doing.
And also
but that story is ubiquitous in every single first-person narrative about ET contact or sighting, or in every story, there's an element of some sort of, or at least implied, government interference or observation or whatever.
Yeah, no, there is. That's true. But here's the problem that I mean, that if you're gonna go into people's stuff and everything like that, and then not release it to the public, what are they doing? That was the other thing that creeped me out about this book, was not just that they've been surveilling and trying to gather data, but they had some kind of agenda too. You know what I'm saying? It's I had a real problem with this whole filter they had, where they read everything through this. To me, it reminded me of that show I used to watch for a while. There was a show on I don't know, that Travel Channel or something that does all those paranormal things about Amish people and the hauntings. I've talked about this before.
Mm-hmm.
And I just sat through probably 20 of these. And every time they thought the devil had entered their house, they found out later there was somebody had put wiring in the walls and they hadn't seen it, or they secretly were using electricity because that's the devil. And they saw everything through that filter. And once the electricity was gone, the problem resolved. It was to me, this whole thing was, you have this very little lens in which you're looking through everything, and you're trying to fit everything into this little, really superstitious, fear-based, stupid ideology. And then you're chasing around all these ghosts, and they don't have any direct experience. They didn't know the people like Jack Parsons or any of those people. They didn't have any direct contact with any of those people and what they were really doing. And they just jumped to these crazy conclusions and then make all this shit up and then stifle actual, real open discussion and real research into this whole subject because of their fear. And if there really was an alien race now that were to descend on the planet and wanted to wipe us out, these people would be a complete hindrance to being able to deal with any of that.
They already have. They have captured. And I know that some people will want to take this with a block of salt, be that as it may. There are reports that they've captured live entities,
Yeah,
beings,
I know
physical
that.
beings,
Yeah, I know that.
and
Yeah.
tortured them.
Yeah, no,
And let them
that's common
die.
knowledge. Well, I think what he was trying to get me to do when I was working in the early 90s as a psychic was to go to Las Vegas, and there is a shuttle I found out about later where people who work at Area 51 go to the Vegas airport and are shuttled
On a
into
plane.
Area
Yeah.
51.
Yeah.
I think he probably was going to try to take me to there and try to communicate. That's my theory, with one of those beings. And maybe he would have read me in.
Telepathically.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe he would have read me in at the time when I got to Vegas. Maybe he would have told me the truth. But I was not going to get on an airplane with this weirdo. And you know what I'm saying? Without him telling me in advance. Maybe he couldn't because of the clearance and all those in the top secret shit. I don't know. But I just feel like this whole way of dealing with this phenomenon, because nobody knows what it is exactly. I mean, we have, like, Jack Valet is probably the closest to anything that makes sense, which is that they're interdimensional
I
beings.
just wrote his name down.
That's funny. That's funny. But that he had a much, they're probably coming from, like, either they can manipulate time space and that's how they travel, or they're probably some kind of progenitor race, which is why we have these missing links in our, DNA and everything. And we don't really have any precursor to ourselves. And they're probably, maybe that's why their gods and angels and all those things are mixed up in this stuff. And, I personally have a theory that maybe Yahweh was like an evil alien who was just
Well,
kind of.
you're not the only one who thinks that.
Mhm.
I asked Paul Wallace about this book because
Okay. Oh, yeah. Oh, good.
right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I want to
Asked.
hear what he has to say.
I said, what do you think? These guys are proposing that we're talking about fallen angels and evil entities and they're after people's souls. And he said, that's not how he looks at it at all.
Right.
Not at all.
Everything they said, if you looked at it from the other angle, be like proof of the other perspective.
Mhm.
And the other thing that really bothered me was the repetition over and over again about how it was people who mingled with the occult who were because that is bullshit. Every experiencer, almost across the board, starts having experiences as early as they can remember. I have memories of these beings looking at me from my crib and trying to talk to me. And I wasn't mingling with the occult. I was a baby. I didn't do any spells or incantations, I had experiences all the way through my life before I even got interested in this kind of stuff, because I was trying to deal with what the fuck is all this weird stuff. You know what I mean?
And it's much more tied to generational genetics.
Yes, it ran in my
Yes.
family. My grandmother
Yep.
had the experiences.
Yep.
She has a Men in Black story, which was that when she was a little kid, her and her sisters were in their bedroom. All of a sudden they saw blue light, which I have seen the blue light many times.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden all the toys in the room started kind of moving around.
Oh,
Okay.
God. Yeah.
And then during that same period, they were downstairs eating dinner with their family. There was only 3 kids at the time. There were more later. And a man in black, all black car, like just typical man in black, knocks on the door, opens the door, comes in. My great grandmother pushed the girls into the basement out of the kitchen, but they peeked and watched from and they saw the man in black shoot their father in the head. And
Oh my God.
yeah. And anyway, he lived. He got a plate in his head, but they moved immediately after that to Indiana from Pennsylvania.
Why did that happen?
Nobody knows. Nobody knows. I don't know. I have no idea.
Did he know and not tell everybody, or did he not know either?
I don't know, because they were extraordinarily secretive, as you can imagine. After that,
So they probably had some idea, and they weren't.
I have no idea. I have no idea. No, my grandma didn't know. I mean, nobody in the family knew why. I don't know what happened. I know I found out years later, like when I was in my mid 30s, that they had worked in the house as domestics for King Ferdinand, or the guy who got shot by the Black Hand.
Franz Ferdinand, yeah.
Franz Ferdinand. And they fled before that happened. But I don't know. I know my grandmother was really, my great grandmother was supposed to be very psychic and sort of an herbalist and stuff.
Mhm.
And my grandmother was psychic. My mother is psychic. It runs in my family. My mother has issues because she hated her mother, but so she doesn't really, she was always weirded out by the whole thing, but it runs in the family, and certainly the UFO stuff does too. But nobody talked about it much. I found this out just like my grandma mentioned it a couple times. Then my aunt corroborated it, said it did happen, and that's as much as I know about it. Yeah.
You know, the thing I think sort of a root of so many of our problems on this planet is this like, oh, you need to know kind of basis sort of thing, you know, because not telling is a form of lying to me.
Yes,
You know,
totally. I agree.
and
It is absolutely.
you know, why do you need to have all these top secret groups and people snooping around through everybody's business, whether domestically or internationally? Look at all of this. Like intrigue, they glorify it in movies. Why not just live simple, honest lives and be who you are?
You
I
are,
agree.
as they always say, you're only as sick as your secrets.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, I can understand it if, like, you know, another, like, if we're going to Russia and we're doing some, you know, trying to get secrets so we can, if they're going to bomb us or something. But
to protect ourselves, yes.
Yeah, but why are they doing this to people who are just having these experiences? And what's the purpose of it without telling people? Like, if I would have been fine if they would have probably come to me and said, you know what, we're studying this stuff. Would you mind taking, you know, telling us what your experiences are? And if it was, I mean, I would have no problem with that. But all the clandestine kind of weirdness. And the interesting thing was, in my early experiences as a little kid, I remember being told, don't tell people about this. Like, don't talk to people in the government. Like, they were like weirded out by it. I mean, I think, I don't know what that's all about, but that was always my vibe. Like, you're not supposed to say anything. Don't say anything to anyone, especially if there's someone in the government. So I think I was predisposed to be really paranoid about that as well. But I think they probably have had bad experiences with our government, being, you know, torturing the beings. Like you said, they captured the being from Roswell and they just tortured that being. I'm sure they've captured tons of other beings as well throughout. And they've, you know, just mistreated them and done all kinds of weird experiments on them. And it's just a really bizarre, you know, I don't, you know, and yet we are living in this mystery, and obviously something's going on because a lot of people have experienced this. I read back in the day, you know, I think it was like, you know, John Mack, who was a psychiatrist and a Harvard professor. He did a lot of research into this whole thing. He was actually hit by a car.
Yeah, he had a tragic accident.
He had a tragic accident.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And from the research he was doing in other people, they actually gamed it out statistically and thought that it was as much as like 10% of all people on the planet, 1 to 10%, actually have had experiences like this.
I believe that.
And were being abducted or whatever. Some of them may not remember all of it or have seen UFOs. And it was like, that is a massive amount of people, you know. And so this is a really important topic for people to be able to kind of figure out what the fuck is going on. You know what I mean? And why we can't have information. Now, I get it in a certain way. Like, if they don't know what it is themselves and they disclose what they have and it scares people and people are very irrational, it might not be great because the government telling you about this is very different than people just talking about it. Makes it more real and legitimate. And in fact, like my husband who has seen UFOs and grays and stuff, he doesn't like to deal with it. And once that stuff came out about the Tic Tacs and all these other, videos that were released by the government, he was like, wow, I can't believe it. We saw that. We saw stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, I know. It's like,
Right.
You saw it with your own eyes. Why are you so weirded out? But it made it real to him that our government was releasing
the level of fear on the part of the government is reflected in the intensity of the ridicule and the mind control over the media. If you say ETs, what's the first sentence? Tin hat.
Nut chopper. Right.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's like a knee jerk.
Yeah.
It's like it's like a
But
reflex.
in a way, that's kind of changing with this 3-eye atlas, because Avi Loeb.
A little bit.
I mean, I've been watching some of his news. I mean, he's talking about aliens kind of openly with this stuff.
Yeah.
So,
no, I think that's
and
good.
for our show tomorrow, I'm going to play some clips about what's coming out of Las Vegas and what they're saying. And some of these news stations, at least locally, are opening up to this now. And
That's
it could
good.
be because, like what you said, that 10%, at some point, that's got to become a part of the consciousness. And the more people that are getting off of watching mainstream media, all those
Yes.
kind of things that kind of
Yes.
train your mind, we're starting to think for ourselves, I think are becoming more open to these kinds of things. But it really, really disturbed me. I mean, it disturbed me before when I was doing all this church and state kind of stuff years ago.
Right.
About here, this lethal. I mean, our military is so lethal, and you've got
Yes.
these like extreme Christians, that would be
Yes.
like the cult multiplied like a millionfold of what I've
Yes.
dealt with already in my life. And
Yes.
then reading this and how, I mean, it's just
Entrenched
sick.
it is
It is
inside
so
the Pentagon.
sick. And
It
this
is.
kind of thinking, and to have that much money, I mean, look at they're talking, you got to cut off food stamps, you got to cut off
Yeah.
Medicaid.
Right.
But how many billions trillions are going into the Pentagon now, and for what?
Right.
Look at how
Right.
much
Are they
money they're
are they
pouring.
chasing this kind of crap around? I mean,
Yeah. Some of
They're
it.
spending a lot of money suppressing the population. Look at all the money they're
Yes.
spending
yeah.
to terrorize people in their own neighborhoods. Did you see
Yeah.
the video the other day of that Gregory Bovey, whatever his name is, who's the head now?
Oh, that creep, yeah.
Yeah, he marching through a suburban, just a residential neighborhood like stormtroopers. It was awful. Really
Was that in
I
disturbing.
saw
Wilmette?
one today outside of Chicago where this guy, driving along, and he happened to have his window open, and they just like sprayed tear gas while
Why?
he's driving. And then
Why?
it turned out his baby in the back seat. It got
The
just
one-year-old?
for the heck of it. We're just going to spray you. We're going to do whatever.
It's because they're
And it's-
psychopaths. They've hired a bunch of psychopaths too.
Right. So you
Did you
have them against UFOs now.
I know,
It's
and
creepy.
also it is creepy. And did you catch in the end of that last chapter where they talk about how they had pictures of Jesus on their guns?
Yeah.
Mikey Weinstein is the one who
Bible
actually he broke that. They have been fighting this for a long time. That's why I'm thinking I really want to send this book to him, and he's got other military ex that are on the board, just to see
Yeah.
what they think, and if he's willing to come on the show. I think you guys
That'd
would
be
like
great.
him. He's
Yeah,
very
I-
high energy, intense. He's really, really intense. But this
You'd
could
have to
add a
be.
dimension because he's been fighting this stuff like forever.
Yeah, I
You
would
know.
love to hear what you have to say about that, because this is a really, I mean, to me, this is kind of like, have you ever heard of those? What are they called? Cults that. There was a movie in the 80s that was sort of based on this crate cults or
Cargo cults.
cargo cults, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where something got dropped down and the people started, it was all this free food and they started worshiping it. And this to me, this is kind of that sort of mentality. It's sort of like you've got these weird interdimensional beings interacting, and they're like, they turned it in upside down, the phenomena, and put it in this very superstitious, weird.
Yeah, it's not God, it's the devil, but same idea. Right. Yeah.
But I mean, here's the other thing I kept thinking the whole time too, is like, if you're really that fearful, if you live in such deep fear of God, then you probably can't venture outside that box because you think you're going to go to hell and these horrible things are going to be happening. And I mean, I remember when I was younger and going through because I went through some very scary experiences, and that does cross your mind, are these evil beings, because it's so creepy,
I think some are. Some are.
Some
I
are.
think.
Some are, for sure. I woke up, I've never talked about this before, but a few years ago, maybe 2 years ago, I woke up in the middle of the night, like with this
Oh, yes.
entity
Yes.
strangling me, and it was like this reptilian looking creature.
Mhm.
And I was like, I've never seen one of those before. And I was like, what the fuck? And I was like, get the fuck off. I just energetically pushed it off me and it dissipated. But I'm like, there are evil ones too. I've had
Yep.
evil things try to fuck with me as well as positive ones. I've had both interactions.
And
So
at the end here too, I thought about that because you've had some really nasty ones messing with you.
I have,
And I know when I went through an experience one time, no, I don't profess to be a Christian. I mean, with the religion, the
Right.
teachings of Christ, yes. I
Right.
agree with that.
Right.
But I know I was dealing with something really bad one time, and whatever it was, my really good friend I was renting from her, she's the one that died that you look like.
Oh
And
yeah.
her kids were like super psychic. They were twins. And we all kept experiencing this thing. And she and her husband woke up and they saw like this blue red light thing like outside.
Uh-huh.
And the kids and I were constantly dealing. And one morning, we all had one of our teeth pulled out. I found
What?
mine on the bathtub, on the
Wow.
bathtub,
That's
and
creepy.
both of her twins had the exact same tooth pulled out.
Oh
Oh
my
my
God.
And
God, you guys.
and
I have to get
so
up in the middle of the night to go pee. Stop it. I'm gonna,
it was very strange, and it really has affected. I've had to have laser surgery, all kinds of stuff because of the teeth, because they screw around with the teeth. But anyway,
Oh,
when one of these things was going on, it was so dark.
right.
My cats protect me, and they
Right.
always sleep at the end of my bed, and they towards the door. They always watch, and the
Right.
cat just woke me up, and it was like growling, and I could feel it too, and this
Right.
like dark, this presence, and I screamed. In the name of Jesus Christ, you get the hell out of here. You are
Right.
not. And that thing, I don't know if it was because of using Christ's name or if it was the force of my
It was you.
emotion,
Yeah.
but it
That was it.
forced this thing out and it never came back and it never
Yeah.
bothered the kids up there again either. But I think maybe some of these people in here where they were talking about that may have dealt with
Yeah.
that stuff, and they
Yes.
said the same thing and they equated it to, oh, I need to be a Christian to keep these things
Right.
out.
Yeah. That I wanted to address that because I had the exact opposite experience when I was having a lot of negative stuff happen and I was praying to Jesus and God and everything, and it got worse.
Oh,
And
I've had that too. Yeah.
it wasn't until I said, get the fuck away from me, that it finally stopped. Now, when I was having a lot of abduction experiences that were physical abductions and they were really like missing time and stuff like that, and eventually a friend of mine who had a missing time experience with kind of lost her mind immediately after and never really recovered. And that's a whole very tragic story. I started getting really, really upset and creeped out by the whole phenomenon and whatever was going on there. It was scary. And I knew from doing, learning magical stuff, I knew some stuff. I knew how to like do some protection stuff that was kind of heavy duty. I tried a lot of different things. Nothing worked. I finally tried what's called the lesser pentagram ritual, which is you put this, you call upon the archangels and you visualize these burning, flaming pentagrams all around you, and say that speak in Hebrew and all that. And because I couldn't sleep at night and I was getting disturbed constantly. So I started doing this before I went to bed every night and it completely stopped. I did it every night. I did it so much that in this house I lived in Burbank, when I started having a bunch of experiences again, and my even dead people couldn't come in. I mean, it was so protected.
yeah.
So a friend of mine was having the same experience. She couldn't sleep. She was being tortured by whatever weird shit was coming through. I taught her how to do that and it stopped. So it's not really Jesus. I mean, Jesus
Right.
is great. If you believe in Jesus and it's your thing, it will work. It has to be, in my opinion, I don't even know why. And you could teach the lesser pentagram to anyone. She wasn't somebody who practiced really anything, and she didn't have a belief system, but it worked. And
It's the intention.
it's the intention, and
Yes, it's the
also
intent.
it's the intention, and also there's something about the archangels and just going through that process of like putting this wall up around you, a circle, and stationing these beings at each of their places that seems to really stop the phenomenon. And so in that way, you think there is something metaphysical about all this stuff. It isn't just, you know, some guy in a, you know, from another planet coming here. And there's something metaphysical about
Well,
this.
all life is energy, and all energy is vibration. And
Right.
whatever you want to use for terminology, you're still dealing with levels of vibration.
Right. So I guess what I'm saying is that I could see where these people who are right-wing Christians, because there is a metaphysical element to this, and there is a spiritual thing about this thing. Because my theory is that my personal theory about the whole thing is that they are progenitors and they're at war with one another from a long time ago, and they're karmically now interlinked with us, and they have to sort of become guardians because they created this mess, and the universe has interlinked them karmically with us.
Yeah.
And so they are constantly sort of trying to manipulate whoever, you know, they can to kind of push history in a
Yeah.
certain way. That
Well, they're trying to achieve a balance between helping without obstructing free will.
some of them are trying to hurt us.
Right.
Yes.
Well, that's right. Right. But the ones that are attempting to help can't go too far. People always ask me, well, why don't they stop this? Or why don't they do this? Because they can't interfere with free will. That's
Right.
our.
They can only influence.
Mhm.
And the same with the negative ones. And the thing is, so in that way, the stories of the angels and the fallen angels, it's not wrong, right?
Correct. Yeah.
I mean, and neither are the gods and goddesses. It's not wrong. It's just
It's all
that
the same.
it's all the same thing, but
Yeah.
it's not that it's you know, it's probably something a lot more complex. Like there is an actual they are physical beings, but they have some kind of technology. Maybe they also have a spiritual component. I mean, if you're that advanced to be able to move and travel through space-time and bend it, you probably also have to understand some metaphysical laws as well
Mhm.
Definitely.
to be able to do that. And so I think that they have some kind of, there are certain, like in the vampire mythologies, right? They cannot cross the threshold if you
They have to be
unless you
invited.
invite
right?
in, right? Now these beings, that's not true because they start indoctrinating people when they're very young. I think it's partially because that's my other theory is that, you know, we're all sort of tweaked, but that they've been slowly tweaking the genetics over
Yeah.
generations.
Yeah.
And the lines that they follow and that they harass from generation to generation are people that they've been tweaking.
Mhm.
And maybe so that they can have better communion or better influence in this world, so that they
Yep.
can manipulate the direction. I don't know. They have their own agenda, like the fairies, the fairy stories. I mean,
Well, they talk about the government making a pact, an agreement with some subset of these entities where you'll give us technology in exchange. We'll give you a pass to experiment on a certain number of
yes,
animals and humans.
right. I mean, so there is a physical component. There's also a weird spiritual component. They have some kind of ability to pull people out of their bodies. But again, if they're operating in a frequency level and they're able to bend space time and it's technological, it just seems like magic to us, but it's not really magic.
Exactly. And some of the stories in here, there were a couple that kind of, grabbed three of them, and I'll go fast because I know you need to go. One of them was, where somebody was like observing like the soul sucking thing, and then they saw like cows being brought up
Yes,
and
yes,
mutilated. I thought that was very interesting because, Linda Moulton Howe,
yes,
she's gone so much into that. That's been a phenomena out at Skinwalker Ranch, as well as many
yes,
ranchers that I work with. This is a
yes,
thing.
yes.
Oh,
It
it's
is real.
It's global.
It is
Oh,
real.
yes, it
real.
is very real. It's very deep right now in Brazil. There seems to be a bunch of it going on. All right, the
Wow.
second thing that kind of, I think I may have actually even met that person. There was a story about how a woman in Sedona was having repeated abduction experiences. That was somewhere in the book. And then in one of them, it was like, because she felt real drugged right before all of these that would
Oh,
happen.
that's right.
And
And
then
then she
one of
was going
them,
to try to kill herself.
right, and the drugging didn't quite work right. And
Right.
she kind of like came conscious, and she saw that it was military people, and they were so
Right.
ashamed. And so when Thunderbeat is on tomorrow, I'm going to ask if she knows about that, because she's in Sedona and she's kind of in the UFO community. So we
Right.
can ask her about some of these things, I think.
Oh, that's
And
gonna be fun.
yeah, and so that, because I've heard stories about that, and it does kind of show that maybe the military and some of these entities are working in tandem.
I think they are. I think they are. I think they are. Yeah.
Then the third point, the last one, other than my just overall disgust with all of it,
Yeah.
but just like
It
little
was really
snippets in here.
disturbing. It was a very
Um,
disturbing book. Yeah.
yeah, they were talking about the Jesus thing, and some of these
Yes.
people that lived in Roswell had turned to Christianity, and then they hadn't been bothered again. And
Right.
I went to Roswell, a few years ago with my friend Elaine. She's been on the show with us. And so we they were renovating the Alien Museum, or whatever the heck that place is, the Roswell crash. And it's just
Right.
so dorky and stupid. It was just like, the whole thing was kind of a disappointment. But anyway, so across the street from the UFO museum, it just looked so much fun. It had these bright colored coffee cups and UFOs and, just
Wow.
fun. So we thought, well, we'll just go there and have a cup of coffee and decide what we're going to do next. And so we went in there, and there was like nobody in there except for this older man. And there was like his friend who seemed like maybe 15 years younger than him. And they had like books, and we sat down to and the coffee was just excellent. But they were like this Christian outreach thing. And they were telling, no, it was interesting because
Wow.
there's like an international like tourism that goes to Roswell,
Right.
because of the crash. And so they were trying to convert everybody that had been to the museum, because they do. They just go over to get coffee, although it was empty when we went in there. And this older man was saying these things are deceptive. They're not what you think they are.
Right.
And it just, and that was kind of how this book ended too. And in
Yeah.
Right.
Roswell,
Yeah.
all of that. And so I'm thinking, I wonder if actually he was
He
running
was one
that
of those
coffee
Christian.
shop.
Yeah. As
Yeah,
a
that was
front.
mentioned in here.
Yeah.
Because
Oh, that's the yes, yes,
yeah,
yes.
and it was
Probably
just
right.
so strange, and it was like, and I think
Hmm.
Elaine said something to like, well, this place is deceptive. We thought it was like a UFO thing, not a Bible like class or
Right.
whatever,
Right.
but they were very pleasant and nice, and it wasn't like too overt, but
Yeah.
I think
I
he
do.
was in this.
Yeah, he probably is. And I want to double down on that, because that was the thing that kept bothering me about the book was that's all a lot of bullshit. First of all, like I said, I see the blood of Jesus Christ is the only thing that stops it. Bullshit. That is not true.
Right,
Okay? That is
exactly.
not true. In fact, I literally had the opposite thing happen. Um, that these people want to pigeonhole all of this phenomena down that thing, or that these things are demonic. Yeah, there are some very negative. I'm not going to lie. I've had terrible, weird, creepy experiences, and there are really dark entity things. And especially if you're going through, like my house was very crazy, and I have a crazy mother. That's when a lot of this negative phenomenon was happening. But even the negative phenomenon that I took to be negative actually had a positive. Some of it was actually positive. Like it seemed like a warning trying to get me, because I have this tumor
Yeah.
growing. And it was, I
Oh
think they're trying to
yeah,
warn me about that, because I was probably I would have died from it.
Yeah,
So,
it's the lens they look through
and
is
even when you
yeah.
yourself are scared, the phenomena seems very scary. And like the Betty Andreessen stuff, if you've ever read her stuff, she was never afraid, and it was never negative, So
hmm
a lot of it is your perception and how
Mhm.
you deal with the
Yeah.
situation and what your lens is. And they just kept wanting to pigeonhole and say these things that were patently untrue, completely false things that they were asserting, and just very narrow-minded, and not really listening to clearly a lot of other pieces of information that would have gone against what they were saying,
Yeah.
hmm
Yeah.
and that was
exactly.
that was really bothering me a lot.
Well, before you go, Denise, I wanted to share something. And I'm pretty sure I've shown it to you before, but for all the poor deprived people who haven't had an opportunity to see this is a card that one of my daughters gave to me for Mother's Day, and they all get a big kick out of my little obsession, as they call it. So here we go.
Here comes That's great. That's hilarious.
I keep that just in front of me to remind me daily.
That is awesome. Oh man,
That's great.
They're so funny, you know.
They are funny. That is funny. It's cute. I like that. That's
Oh my
funny.
gosh.
And
That's
it's in the
great.
inside it says Happy Mother's Day.
That's great. I want that card. That's so awesome. That is. I don't know where they found that. That is.
Yeah, I
really
was just
amazing.
looking at the back. She got it at the at some bookstore I've never heard of. I'll have to ask her. She did go to a psychic fair a while back.
Oh,
Maybe
she did.
got it there. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's a really good idea for a card. I could make one. I want to make one.
That's
Like
what I was
that.
saying. You
Rip
could
that
make
up.
one like it. That was good.
That's really
That's
great.
great.
Yeah, that's really fun. I love that. That's one of the best things I've ever seen. That's hilarious.
I'll tell her.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys for doing this. I appreciate
Thanks
it.
for the invite. This was very interesting.
Yeah, it
this
was
book.
fun.
Thank
And
you.
I'm sorry I made you do all that homework and read that horrifying book.
Oh
yeah,
no,
I
it
know.
was well worth it. It was very interesting.
It was
I
interesting.
wasn't going to cover this, you know, in my Saturday book, and then I decided, well, if I'm going to do all this work, I might as well.
Might as well use
And
it.
I'm glad
Yeah.
I did, because people were into it.
Were
Yeah.
they really? Interesting.
People were
Okay.
very engaged. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very bizarre subset of all these things coming together. It's the timing. That book was written in 2019, but I didn't know about it till I don't even know how I found out about it. But I was like, this is just it's just weird how much of this stuff is like making so much more sense with this book.
Well,
So-
that last prediction about how the military would be
Yes.
raiding in this, that is the only thing in the book that really freaked me out, because I thought, oh my God, it's manifesting in real time.
Well, because obviously it's a plan. It's a plan going back, way before even Trump. They've just used Trump as their tool to
Yeah.
get this Trojan horse situation happening. So it's really interesting. But thank you guys. Come and watch the Cosmic Fold on Wednesday nights at 7 Central and 5 Pacific
Mhm.
and 8 Eastern.
And
So-
now we're mountain time again. It makes my life so much easier.
And Mountain Time
So,
is
yeah.
7 is what?
6
Guys,
o'clock.
p.m.
time zones. Oh my God.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of too many time zones.
See,
But
we don't change time, so it gets really
I know that's
confusing
what's
on
so
our end.
insane about Arizona. I know it's very confusing, the whole Arizona thing. Okay, well, thanks everybody for watching.
Thank you,
Namaste.
everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah,
All
thanks.
righty.
Longafoil.